So a little deeper look, the over-responsive mental stress, that external stimulus from, loud noises, threatening words, people around you that may be cluttering your mind up, the noise of the street. How much of that is in your life? Is it causing an abnormal binary brain signal for you to live in sympathetic dominance? Adrenaline, cortisol, epinephrine? What about that over-responsiveness of fear, false evidence appearing real, where your brain is being triggered by things that really aren't even real and creating a stress response? That can look a lot like anxiety, where your body is staying in an anxious state because it has a fear that something is going to show up. So many times we live in the frauds of life with fear, resentment, anger, unforgiveness, disappointment, and shame, that our stress system or stress response system is chronically activated. And then once that goes on for a very long time, here comes depression. It just sets in, blunting all of our emotions and a sense of futility. It's even more serious. And we end up on medications, or for some people, even wanting to end or take their own life. So thoughts to ponder. Your perception can create the stress response or not. We can begin to think differently, see things differently if we stay aware, open our eyes, and become present to everyday life.
And listen, we can absolutely change our environment by the way we think, what we say, and who we choose to be around. I'm going to say that one more time, but it's very important that we get this. We can change our environment by what we think, what we say, or who we choose to be around. Because we set the tone for our environment. We're talking internally and externally. When you say something like this, I am so stressed, you don't understand, I'm so stressed. What did those words that we just spoke do to the environment? Did they change it for the less stressful way or to the more stressful way? The more stressful, because we've already got it decided in our brain, this is stressful, and we're going to act on that stress by creating more stress. So it's this circular feed-forward loop that goes nowhere. And it really goes backwards because our health begins to just deteriorate to the point where there's nothing left. And then we give up hope and we say, what the heck, and throw in the towel. You can see how we start off up here and then it just sinks and it goes down. But everyone's breakdown or handling of this load that we have is different. We know some people have this uncanny ability to handle stress a little bit better. Or at least it appears that way on the outside. You may not live with them, you may not know them from the outset, because many times we can put on these things called masks. We can walk around with our mask on and look all good and sweet and kind, but inside we're dying inside. Our load has got too big, it's got too heavy. We're having all kinds of issues. This is where we have to learn to take the mask off and quit wearing it when we look in the mirror. Pull the mask off, at least when we're in the mirror, and at least when we're around those we love the most, and really diagnose it correctly. Am I having overstress or emotional difficulties? Am I beginning to have physical problems with this? Am I beginning to have cardiovascular problems and sleep disorders? When our ability to handle that load gets out of hand over time, that load will cost our body. It will wear our defense systems down. It will overload us. And we'll begin to, guess what? We'll begin to adapt to those burdens. What does adaptation look like? We are so used to being stressed, it becomes the norm. Dr. Hans Selye coined the phrase general adaptation syndrome. I love the first letter of each of those words. General, G, adaptation, A, syndrome, S. When we live that way, we're out of gas. And it's normal. It becomes normal. Here's how you know if you're living in a state of being out of gas or living in a state of general adaptation syndrome. If it stresses you out to sit down and be quiet and not say a word for 10 minutes. Think about it. I can't stand to sit here. I've watched this occur. I can't stand to sit there. It's too quiet. I got to talk. Right? That is telling you and telling yourself that you are living in a highly stressed environment inside. We tell people many times, just get quiet, man. Just shh. And see what happens. You begin to hear. You begin to feel. You begin to understand who you are. And it becomes a situation where perhaps that stress can come off of you a little bit.
Or life can look like this picture. So just a little fun fact is, sleep disorders can be debilitating, and oftentimes it can be one of the major things that throws our life out of balance. And sleep is oftentimes thought about as a waste of time. It's a waste of time to sleep. The fact is that being awake for 17 to 19 hours is like carrying a blood alcohol level of 0.05. Isn't that interesting? Being awake 24 hours is like having a blood alcohol level of 0.1. So the lack of sleep is not really a waste of time, but it's a recreation of new energy, clarity, and thinking. So remember, stress can be handled by how we think, breathe, and move.
And just a note on that, I remember you all heard Cade in my biography talking about 10 years on the SWAT team. As he was reading that, I was thinking about this time of the presentation and thinking about an event that happened to me. For perhaps my 7th or 8th year when I was on the SWAT team in Tulsa, I was a sniper. And I remember an event where this lady was suicidal with a pistol, and she was in an apartment down off of Riverside Drive. And I remember being deployed out there and laying on my belly with my .308 rifle zeroed in on the window that she kept sticking her head out of with that gun. Well, that thing proceeded on 4 hours, 5 hours. It went from the middle of the day into the night. And I'm still out there awake, trying to stay awake. It proceeded on all night long, and I was about 18 or 19 hours into this thing. And I knew what to do. I knew how to control my breathing. I'd been in those situations before, but I found myself in a real quandary because, as Dr. Michele said, that when you are awake 17, 18 hours, 19 hours straight, you're operating cognitively as if your blood alcohol content is 0.05. When you get up to 24 hours, it's 0.10, and you can go to jail for driving under the influence. For that, the previous one, you could go to jail for driving impaired. So our cognitive ability or decision-making is impaired. And there I was in a state of impairment. And I remember it clearly. When she kept sticking her head out, I was like thinking, okay, when I pull this trigger, she's going to die. I've just taken a life. What do I do? And I kept second guessing myself at that moment in time, and I wasn't sure anymore. And I was thinking, now, and I was so disturbed by that moment. This thing, that was a major catalyst in my life to pursue this concept of what stress would do. And that started me studying and looking and finding out what it was. And we've taken pride in not sleeping. But I'm telling you, how many have driven home before when you're tired and find yourself, how many have fallen asleep at a traffic light? Seriously, here's what I mean by this. It takes one time, one mistake, going off the road and trying to overcorrect and roll in that car. You die. You leave someone but left behind. And it's all because we didn't evaluate this concept of fatigue that caused from chronic stress. So we can't be more serious about this. It happened to me, and I was a trained professional. Right? And I began to question that. It was really, really real. Now, with this is interesting. I find it fascinating. The red circle up there, and I want you to think about this, represents, I made it red because I look at the inside of our body being red, blood, right? So the outside of the circle is like our life. And the inside is like our emotions, our mind, and our spiritual self. In this case, we're talking about the essence of who we are, that inner voice that says, don't do that or do that. The arrows represent life pressures. Life pressures. They get to us from the outside. On the outside, everything looks really, really good. Really, really good. But no one knows what's going on the inside. And the inside wounds show themselves on the outside secondarily. The inside wounds will manifest and fester, and it might look like this on the outside. You're having pressure financially, relationally, with a job, whatever the case may be, with kids. And inside there's this thing that's there. No one can see it. You know it's there, but no one else can see it. On the outside, look, everything looks good. Everything looks great. But as the pressures continue, life is going to continue to speed up. And how many think life's going faster? Life's going so much faster. And that same thing on the inside, no one sees it but you. And then we see this condition that we've all seen on the side of the road.
Will this be you?
Understand, on the inside is a prerequisite for what's going to happen on the outside. And eventually, if pressure on the inside builds up so big, there will be an explosion on the outside. We've all seen these tires. The next time you see a tire in a blowout, remember that tire one time was rolling down and it was attached to a car or a truck. And it looked okay. And all of a sudden, one day, everybody say one day, it became unraveled.
So what are we going to do about it? How are we going to find and maintain balance? We need to get more rest. We need to schedule that time in there for relaxation and the right amount of sleep. We may need to take up a meditation class where we just learn to quiet our mind. Or perhaps do some yoga, some soft flow yoga where we do gentle stress relief techniques. Breathing and gentle exercise is very, very powerful in changing the sympathetic response to being more parasympathetically driven. Take some time outside in Mother Nature. Let Mother Nature heal you with the sun and the sky and the green trees, the greenery, the grass, the air, the smell of the air. Maybe try some biofeedback. Biofeedback can be very powerful in helping retrain some of the things that get ingrained in our mind as stressors. You know, those negative thoughts, sometimes they're just there and we need some retraining. Biofeedback can help us retrain our brain. And of course, we know about our dietary intake. 85% of your long-term outcome is nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. Is your nutritional lifestyle plan, is that one that's going to nourish and heal you and help you recover? That's anti-inflammatory, anti-stress, with plenty of whole foods, plenty of raw fruits, fresh vegetables, nuts and seeds, good clean protein? Or is it all junked up with additives, preservatives, metabolic waste products that your body can't even see or use? And perhaps one of the solutions to pollution is to drink plenty of fresh water. So our bodies are 60% water, and if we're not getting enough hydration in a day, perhaps we're running a quart low, and our insides are not balanced.
So we definitely need to understand the stress response is a big deal. Make time for some music, find some hobbies, find something else to do to disconnect. How many find yourself, by the show of hands, overstressed by your job? That's very common, it is, and many times we lose our identity when we get overstressed by the job, and we get identified as the job, right? And so I will give a plug to our second book, Fork Your Diet, that I think everybody needs to read because it echoes what Dr. Michele talked about a moment ago. Fear, resentment, anger, unforgiveness, disappointment, and shame, that is the acronym of frauds. And when you lose your identity, you lose yourself. When you lose yourself, you lose control of the ability to handle these stressors, and whatever you become is not who you are. And then when you become that thing that you don't want to be, it's not who you are, and you're not happy with it, many times you got to go back and figure out, what am I so scared about? Who do I resent? Why am I angry? Who do I need to forgive? Why am I so disappointed? And why am I living in shame? It's a very much important to do. We've got to come up with a real organized, intentional plan to withstand this. So make time. We need to understand that time is incredibly valuable. We make our schedule. Keep an eye on the things that we're not coping well with. For example, are we finding ourselves smoking or drinking more, or sleeping less, or eating more junk? Are we finding ourselves drowning ourselves? I'm just so stressed, I'm going to go drown myself in a plate of broccoli. Does that happen? No. We want to go drown ourselves in a plate of pasta or breads or processed food or candy or donuts or cookies. And because we just want to say, I want one cookie because it gives us one lift up. But you can see, I think, right, that this is a downhill spiral. We need to keep a list of the things that hassle us and figure out what they really are. Look at them. Is it something I can change? Is it something I can't change? If it's something I can change, change it. The things you can't change, guess what that's called? Grace. Deal with it. Change the things that you can change. The things you can't change, accept them as they are and handle them better. And in the middle of this change, we need to avoid. Everyone say avoid. We need to say avoid. Big word. Learning to say no is a powerful concept, by the way. Talking about boundaries there. We need to avoid the things that drive us down those pathways because they can be so catastrophic. Learning to say no is a powerful thing. You know, we sometimes, and everyone will relate to what I'm talking about, we sometimes have a fear of saying no because we fear that we're going to hurt someone else's feelings. Now, I said the word fear twice. Now, in that case, it is clearly defined as false evidence appearing real. Unless you've asked them, hey, when I say no, does that hurt your feelings? And if they say yes, then I think you have a relational thing to work out. But that's true dialogue, isn't it? If someone is trying to poison you and you say no, that's a proper no, isn't it? But if you fear saying no because you're afraid you're going to make them mad and they're trying to poison you, we're both going to die. Where does that get us? Nowhere. The point being, learning to say no needs to be just as much a part of our life as that powerful word yes. I read somewhere, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Pretty powerful statement, don't you think? Simply put, if we make a decision and we set a boundary, hold the boundary firm. There are certain non-negotiables that we must establish. 1, 2, or 3 or 4 things that we are just got to say no to. We've got to say no to. Everyone knows what non-negotiables are, right? Set the list of non-negotiables and start with one. One. You know, look at your wife. You can, for example, say, one non-negotiable is I'm not going to have a cheat day on you. Just being silly. You get my point, right? I mean, that is a non-negotiable. Or the consequences are dire. We have to learn to set these non-negotiable because it's going to help us and it will also help the other person learn to love us better. Because until we set the boundaries, no one knows what they are and they continue to encroach on those boundaries and get inside those boundaries and then both of you are resentful. Every time I go there, they always feed that stuff and I'm afraid to say no and because it hurts their feelings, but you've never talked about it. And if you say no and they don't respect that, whose issue is that? That's theirs, that ain't yours.